You've never seen a priest like this. He's wearing a cassock, rhythmically tapping a wooden fish, but in just a few swift moves, he sends a gang of thugs who'd come to harass the temple scattering like rats. From behind him, the compassionate abbot coughs lightly, signaling him to stop. The priest obediently sets down the wooden fish. Seeing this, the thugs, thinking they have an advantage, order their underlings to surround and attack. But the priest, as if protected by divine power, unleashes a flurry of kicks and punches, leaving the remaining thugs in a crumpled heap. The gang leader begs for mercy, but the priest looks up at two streaks of clouds intersecting in the sky, interpreting it as a sign from both Buddha and God. What follows is a meteor shower of punches, sending the leader straight to hell, figuratively speaking, of course. This unorthodox priest is Heil. After the brawl, the police are called. The thugs, feigning innocence, accuse the priest of unprovoked assault. Heil calmly throws his bowl of leftover bone broth at the gang leader, then instructs the abbot to retrieve a memory card hidden in his glasses. The card contains video evidence of the thugs' entire escapade at the temple. Turns out they're the lackeys of a corrupt politician, sent to intimidate the abbot into selling the temple land. With the video as proof, the thugs are promptly arrested. The grateful abbot thanks Heil for his intervention. Heil humbly smiles, saying that punishing evil transcends religious boundaries. It's simply the right thing to do. At the church, Sang Yeon, a young altar boy, shares some spicy rice cakes with Heil, vowing to become a righteous and powerful priest just like him. Later that day, the church holds a memorial service for a deceased priest. Sang Yeon is in attendance. Heil notices a red mark on Sang Yeon's neck and that the boy looks unwell. During the service, Heil delivers a passionate sermon, preaching his unwavering belief in justice to the congregation. He declares that anyone who commits a crime, regardless of power or influence, should face equal punishment. This is Heil's creed. Mid-sermon, Sang Yeon suddenly collapses. Heil rushes him to the hospital. The diagnosis is grim. Sang Yeon has a congenital heart condition, now compounded by a brain injury. The doctors give him a slim chance of recovery. Looking at Sang Yeon lying unconscious in the hospital bed, Heil's thoughts drift back to years earlier, when a much younger Sang Yeon first came to the church as an altar boy. He remembers the boy growing up, playing and laughing within the church walls, sharing his life with Heil. The priest's heart aches with profound sadness, fearing he may lose the young boy he's come to care for like a son. Their bond had grown as close as brothers. Remembering their shared past, Heil's eyes well up with tears. Detective Gu breaks the news to Heil. The real reason behind Sang Yeon's collapse was a drug overdose. Detective Gu is Heil's closest friend, a police captain by day and a vigilante by night, fighting injustice alongside the priest. Of course, neither Heil nor Detective Gu believes for a second that the innocent and kind-hearted Sang Yeon would ever use drugs. Determined to uncover the truth, Detective Gu takes Heil to the narcotics division at the police station. Heil suggests they investigate Sang Yeon's social media accounts. However, after a thorough check, they found nothing unusual. Sang Yeon's online activity is completely normal, with no trace of any drug-related connections. Just then, the narcotics investigation team from the Supreme Prosecutor's Office arrives, announcing they're taking over Sang Yeon's drug case. Detective Gu is puzzled. Typically, only major drug trafficking operations warrant the involvement of the Supreme Prosecutor's Office. Heil also senses something is amiss. Normally, such drug investigations are handled locally. The Supreme Prosecutor's Office getting involved feels like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, highly unusual. After discussing it with Detective Gu, Heil suspects the Supreme Prosecutor's Office is trying to cover something up. The next morning, Heil watches the news and, sure enough, all related news articles have been scrubbed from the internet. This confirms his suspicion. There's definitely something fishy going on. To clear Sang Yeon's name, Heil visits the boy's high school. However, all he encounters are malicious rumors and judgmental whispers from other students, all of whom seem to have swallowed the false accusations. Heil explodes in righteous anger, furiously wiping away the hateful graffiti scrawled across Sang Yeon's desk. He refuses to let this injustice stand. He will fight for Sang Yeon, for truth and justice, no matter how powerful the forces arrayed against him. Strangers might misunderstand and criticize Sang Yeon, but Heil hoped that his classmates, who saw him every day, would have basic faith in him. As Heil was leaving, a student called him back. This student was the only one who believed in Sang Yeon's innocence. He told Heil that Sang Yeon had called him the day before the incident, frantically saying his phone had been stolen and repeatedly mentioning someone named Si-tae. Hae-il thanked the student, clutching this small lead. Meanwhile, Detective Gu, the night-stalking vigilante, was also making progress. He'd enlisted the help of delivery drivers, asking them to photograph any suspicious individuals or activities they encountered on their routes. Among these allies was Song Sak, a young man from Thailand working as a delivery driver for a Korean Chinese restaurant. This wide net proved effective. Within a day, Song Sak and a network of other delivery drivers, zipping around Seoul's Gangnam district on their electric scooters, had captured countless photos of potential drug deals. To identify the person who might have given Sang-yeon the drugs, Hae-il's network of allies sprang into action, each staking out different locations from the photos. After a sleepless night, they had a breakthrough. One of the allies spotted a high school student stashing a package of drugs in a hidden corner. That evening, the student returned to his base, gleefully splitting the profits with his accomplices. At that moment, Hae-il arrived, shouting out the name Si-tae that Sang-yeon had mentioned. A student from the drug dealing group stepped forward. Hae-il saw the distinctive earphones he'd given Sang-yeon hanging around the student's neck. This was the culprit. Without a word, Hae-il extended his pinky finger, striking a pressure point on the student, then proceeded to dismantle the rest of the young thugs with swift, brutal efficiency. Faced with such overwhelming force, Si-tae confessed. He'd been dealing drugs when Sang-yeon happened to witness the transaction and take a photo. Sang-yeon fled, but Si-tae had found the boy's name and school on a test paper he dropped. To prevent being exposed, Si-tae not only destroyed Sang-yeon's phone, but also forced him to take a drug. Hae-il demanded the name of Si-tae's supplier. Si-tae refused, claiming a God-fearing priest wouldn't resort to violence. True, a priest couldn't kill someone. Hae-il silently signaled to Detective Gu with a look, then launched into a convincing act of madness, smashing his head repeatedly against bricks. Terrified by the priest's unsettling display, Si-tae finally cracked, revealing the name of his supplier, Gerald. That night, Hae-il and Detective Gu raided Gerald's hideout. Working in perfect synchronization, they took down Gerald's underlings in a blink. Then, with a single decisive move, they subdued Gerald himself. Casually munching on popcorn, they interrogated him with a playful, almost mocking demeanor. Finally, they extracted a crucial piece of information, an online alias, Busan Fire Eel. This alias, used on the dark web, was the only lead they had on the larger operation. Hae-il and Detective Gu left the scene and alerted the police. Moments later, the narcotics team from the Supreme Prosecutor's Office arrived to find the drug dealers tied up, the evidence neatly laid out, and a frenzy of reporters snapping photos downstairs. Late that night, Hae-il visited the still unconscious Sang-yeon in the hospital, praying for the boy to pull through. Back at the church, Hae-il mourns the passing of the elderly priest he revered, asking his companions what the late priest would have done in this situation. As soon as he utters these words, everyone stands up. They know that whenever Hae-il says this, it means he's about to do something reckless, regardless of their advice. Sure enough, Hae-il asks, if the nickname is Busan related, doesn't that mean the person is in Busan? Before anyone can stop him, Detective Gu nods, stating the obvious. Taking advantage of the ensuing commotion, Hae-il slips out unnoticed and heads to Busan, determined to root out the source of the evil. In Busan, Hae-il is greeted by Mr. Go, a former gangster turned restaurateur, and a staunch supporter of Hae-il's righteous crusade. While treating Hae-il to dinner, Mr. Go receives a call from Detective Gu, inquiring about Hae-il's whereabouts. Before leaving for Busan, Hae-il had left a message for Detective Gu and his other allies, explaining the danger of his mission and his unwillingness to put them at risk. Detective Gu, worried about Hae-il, knows that Mr. Go is the priest's first point of contact in Busan. However, Hae-il had already instructed Mr. Go to lie, so he tells Detective Gu that he hasn't been in contact with Hae-il for a long time. Having successfully misled Detective Gu, Hae-il asks Mr. Go to investigate the Busan Fire Eel, nickname he'd gleaned from the student drug dealers. Unfortunately, the nickname is too common, making it difficult to track down the right person. After instructing Mr. Go to narrow the search within drug circles, Hae-il heads to a seminary in Busan. He had previously declined an invitation to teach there, but now accepts, needing a base of operations for his investigation. On his first day, Hae-il sets himself apart. Unlike other priests who preach faith and dogma, he passionately rallies his seminarians against the evils of the world. To prepare them to combat this hellish world, Hail uploads videos of himself practicing taekwondo, encouraging the students to follow his heavenly training regimen. Unbeknownst to everyone, the energetic Hail is battling a secret illness. Doctors have warned him that if the condition worsens, he faces not only excruciating pain, but also the possibility of total paralysis. Looking out at the sin-ridden city shrouded in darkness, Hail resolves to keep his illness hidden, hoping to accomplish as much good as possible before he's incapacitated, fulfilling his mission as a Barator. In Latin, Barator means warrior. It's a title given by the Pope to select priests authorized to act covertly in the shadows, dispensing justice. Hail became a Barator 4 years ago. Those who support the Barator are called Cosmos, and Detective Gu, for instance, is Hail's #1 Cosmos. Aside from his Bellator duties, life at the seminary proves to be quite eventful. That evening, the seminary president calls, instructing Hail to bail out a student named Che-Du from the police station. Che-Du, the mischievous and troublemaking vice president of the seminary class, had been arrested for fighting with gangsters. To secure Che-Du's release, Hail puts on an Oscar-worthy performance, tearfully apologizing to the police, claiming responsibility for his student's behavior, and pleading for leniency. Ironically, Che-Du, who had been falsely claiming to be a priest outside the seminary, is exposed by Hail with a single sentence. Since he's not a priest, the police decide to detain him for further investigation. However, moments later, the cardinal's secretary calls the police station. After taking the call, the officer immediately releases Che-Du. Clearly, there are powerful forces at play, adding another layer of intrigue to Hail's already complicated mission. Outside the police station, Hail warns Che-Du not to cause trouble again. Che-Du defends himself, explaining that the gangster he fought was bullying a disabled person, and he couldn't stand idly by. Despite his scolding tone, Hail is secretly pleased with Che-Du's righteous act. Because of his frequent troublemaking, Che-Du isn't allowed to participate in the elderly care volunteer program with the other seminarians. Hail offers Che-Du the chance to volunteer with him instead, even saving his phone number in Che-Du's phone. Back at the seminary, Hail continues his unorthodox teaching methods, blasting upbeat music and encouraging the students to dance along, much to the seminary president's exasperation. Mr. Go brings Hail good news. He's located a gangster rumored to be close with Busan Fire Eel, frequently buying drugs from him. That evening, Hail heads to the food stalls, instructs Mr. Go to buy more ice, and proceeds directly to the gangster's hideout. Announcing his intention to eradicate heresy, Hail brings down 2 of the gangster's underlings in under 30 seconds, forcing them to beg for mercy. Inside the bar, the gangster is harassing a waitress when Hail arrives, delivering a swift kick that sends him flying. Seeing the terrified waitress, Hail changes his tack, declaring that the gangster isn't a heretic to be eradicated, but rather needs an exorcism. He then throws the gangster into a large bathtub filled with ice. Chilled to the bone, the gangster has no choice but to cooperate. Seeing the effectiveness of this method, Hail produces a photo of the gangster and Busan Fire Eel together, demanding to know Fire Eel's location. The gangster plays dumb. Hail, with a crazed grin, dumps another bucket of ice into the tub. The terrified gangster finally reveals that he's meeting his good brother at a bar. Hail takes the gangster's phone and makes him call Busan Fire Eel, pretending to want to buy drugs. Through the call, Hail learns Fire Eel's location and heads out to meet Mr. Go. Mr. Go, carrying 2 more bags of ice, looks as if he's seen a ghost. Hail is completely oblivious until Detective Gu suddenly appears behind him. Hail throws a bag of ice at Detective Gu, accidentally injuring him. It turns out Detective Gu went to great lengths to get to Busan. Suspecting Mr. Go's clumsy lie, the vigilante detective knew that Hail was with him. To get leave from work, Detective Gu resorted to drastic measures, feigning a severe anxiety attack complete with panda, like makeup and hiding in a closet with snacks, finally convincing his boss to grant him a month off. Now, Mr. Go puts on noise-canceling headphones and listens to music, anticipating the inevitable argument between Hail and Detective Gu. Despite the bickering, Hail fails to convince Detective Gu to return to Seoul. That night, the 3 arrive at a warehouse where Busan Fire Eel is supposedly hiding. Before entering, Hail removes the Roman collar from his cassock, slips through a rusty opening in the warehouse door, and requests a private conversation with Busan Fire Eel. Fire Eel orders his men to attack. Suddenly, Detective Gu launches himself into the air, executing a graceful flying kick, his steel-hard head connecting with the first attacker, knocking him unconscious. Hae-il steps forward, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the remaining thugs. As they swarm him, he unleashes a flurry of blows, sending them sprawling. Busan Fire-Il tries to escape in the chaos. Hae-il gives chase, throwing a precise projectile that hits Fire-Il in the back of the neck, subduing him. Gasping for breath, Fire-Il wonders who these two daredevils are, boasting that his boss isn't someone to be trifled with. Just as Hae-il and Detective Gu are about to interrogate Fire-Il, a female officer from the Busan Narcotics Unit arrives, shooting Fire-Il in the forehead with a tranquilizer dart, knocking him unconscious. She then points her gun at Hae-il and Detective Gu, ordering them to put their hands up. Without a word, the female officer handcuffs the drug dealers. Hae-il had apprehended, even mistakenly assuming Hae-il and Detective Gu are part of the gang. The officer, Jia Young, is from the Busan Narcotics Unit, and her mission is to take down the entire drug operation. Detective Gu shows his badge, clarifying they're on the same side. Jia Young, unimpressed, throws his badge aside, completely distrustful. Hae-il then produces his Roman collar, attempting to prove he's a priest. Jia Young responds by shoving her gun in his mouth, silencing him. Both men are handcuffed and hauled off to the sauna with the drug dealers. However, Jia Young quickly finds Hae-il and Detective Gu's records, confirming their identities and releasing them. Hae-il hopes she'll share information about the drug ring, or allow them to participate in the investigation. As expected, Jia Young refuses, waving them off. The idea of a priest catching drug dealers is simply too absurd. That evening, Mr. Go treats Hae-il and Detective Gu to a lavish meal as a reward for their efforts. Over dinner, Hae-il analyzes the situation, pointing out that if Busan Fire-Il doesn't talk, Jia Young won't have any leads. Detective Gu surmises that Jia Young and her team are a small independent unit, likely operating without the knowledge of their superiors. The drug organization won't take Busan Fire-Il's capture lightly, putting Jia Young's team in danger. Sensing the impending danger, Hae-il decides to call for backup. He contacts Kyung Sun, a member of his Righteous Alliance and a crucial supporter of his Barator missions, currently on assignment in Los Angeles. Unfazed, Hae-il insists Kyung Sun return to Busan immediately. He also instructs Detective Gu and Mr. Go to surveil the sauna, monitoring Jia Young's investigation closely. He, meanwhile, must return to his duties at the seminary. Even back at the seminary, Hae-il finds no peace. After his recent brawl with gangsters, he now has to take Che-du, the most mischievous seminarian, on a social work outing. Their task is to serve the elderly and neglected members of the community. Hae-il is saddened by the dilapidated state of the area and the number of impoverished, lonely seniors. Che-du tells Hae-il that the local government completely ignores their plight. An elderly man approaches, angrily accusing the priest of being a fraud and a devil, claiming that the God and hope preached by the church are non-existent. Hae-il offers no defense. Faced with these abandoned souls, he finds himself speechless. An elderly woman struggles to push a cart of scrap uphill. Che-du and Hae-il rush to help her, pushing the cart back to her home. They clean her apartment, cook ramen for her, and engage in conversation. Playful Che-du mentions that Hae-il is a great singer. The woman asks for a song. Hae-il obliges, pouring his heart into a heartfelt rendition of his signature tune. While eating, the woman cheerfully tells Hae-il that she's about to start a new job at a food factory, where she can work sitting down. Hae-il gives her some money, pretending to be wealthy and urging her to buy herself some decent food. In reality, he's so poor that he has to mend his own torn cassock. Hae-il tells Che-du to stop offering empty platitudes like keep hope alive to the elderly. What they need more than sermons is companionship to alleviate their loneliness. Just as his social work outing concludes, Kyung Sun arrives in Busan to meet Hae-il. When Hae-il recounts the story of Sang-yeon being drugged, Kyung Sun flies into a rage, vowing to shake down the drug ring like she's getting rid of dust mites in a comforter. With Kyung Sun as his formidable partner, Hae-il feels energized, like he's just downed a Red Bull. Following Kyung Sun, other members of Hae-il's Righteous League arrive in Busan, including a nun, Father Han, from his church. United by their shared sense of justice, they're determined to fight evil and refuse to let Hae-il face this danger alone. While Hae-il's allies gather in Busan, the drug ring is also making moves. One of the thugs from the warehouse raid escaped, and reported to his boss about the attack and Busan Fire Eel's capture, describing two peculiar individuals, one of them a priest with Donnie Yen level martial arts skills. The boss, a ruthless and vicious Southeast Asian kingpin, assumes the priest is an undercover cop and orders his men to locate Fire Eel and prevent him from revealing any information to the police. This kingpin is the true embodiment of evil. Publicly, he's a charming and well-mannered corporation president who visits nursing homes, bearing gifts for the elderly, feigning concern, and even promising to find them suitable, high-paying jobs. Privately, however, he recoils from the smell of the elderly clinging to his clothes, frantically dousing himself with cologne after leaving the nursing home. Meanwhile, Jia Young interrogates Fire Eel, promising a reduced sentence if he reveals the identity of his boss. Fire Eel, though seemingly dim-witted, is no fool. He knows that snitching would likely result in his death before he ever sees the outside of a prison cell. Jia Young's colleague warns her not to report the interrogation to Prosecutor Nam, fearing a leak. They're unaware that Prosecutor Nam is already in the loop. A young and ambitious prosecutor with a promising future, he's been colluding with the drug ring for personal gain. The charismatic kingpin quickly recognizes Prosecutor Nam's potential and recruits him, showering him with lavish meals and entertainment. Prosecutor Nam reciprocates by providing access to a police special forces helicopter. However, the kingpin inadvertently reveals his knowledge of Prosecutor Nam's background, a talented prosecutor with impressive tactics but lacking powerful connections. The kingpin promises to help Prosecutor Nam become president within 10 years in exchange for his protection. Seeing through the kingpin's manipulation, Prosecutor Nam immediately withdraws the helicopter offer. The kingpin, anticipating this, has already sent men to surveil Prosecutor Nam's parents in their hometown. After some back and forth and recognizing their mutual needs, Prosecutor Nam and the kingpin ally. Just as they reach an agreement, the kingpin's men report they've located Fire Eel. Mr. Go receives the same intel. Through surveillance, he spots a toy company van parked near the sauna, likely containing drug dealers, monitoring Jia Young and her partner. Jia Young and her colleague decided to move Fire Eel to a different location. Hey Eel, Detective Gu, and Mr. Go follow, witnessing a group of violent crime unit officers storming the sauna. These corrupt officers, in league with the drug ring, intend to arrest Jia Young's partner, Detective Hyun, on fabricated charges. When Detective Hyun resists, the officers contact Prosecutor Nam, who orchestrated the arrest. Prosecutor Nam reprimands the narcotics unit for acting independently and authorizes the violent crimes unit to use live ammunition if Detective Hyun doesn't comply. Jia Young overhears this threat through a phone call. Detective Hyun surreptitiously leaves on speakerphone. As Jia Young worries about her partner, a large truck suddenly barrels towards her. While she escapes serious injury, she emerges from the wreckage to find herself surrounded by armed thugs. Just as she's about to be overwhelmed, a car comes screeching towards the scene at breakneck speed. Out of the car steps the dashing priest Hale. Without a word, he launches into action, sending the thugs flying. After a quick head count, he announces that the express train to hell is about to depart. Amidst the chaos, Fire Eel attempts to escape. Hale gives chase, but Fire Eel trips, tumbling like a runaway cotton candy ball, several meters away. Police sirens wail in the distance. Hale and Detective Gu urge Jia Young to come with them, warning that if she's apprehended by her superiors now, she'll be excluded from the investigation. Despite her hesitation, Hale and Detective Gu bundle her and the unconscious Fire Eel into their car. Unfortunately, Fire Eel's injuries from the tumble prove fatal. He dies at the hospital. This turn of events puts Hale and his allies in a precarious position. Jia Young receives news that her entire narcotics team has been arrested, while the drug dealers have been released. She's now a wanted fugitive. She shares her suspicions about Prosecutor Nam with Hale and Detective Gu, recounting how he's dismissed drug cases involving influential figures in the past, even climbing the ranks because of it. She's convinced there's a corrupt connection between him and the drug ring. To turn the tide, Hale instructs Detective Gu and Mr. Go to take care of Jia Young while he goes to meet someone, Kyung Sun. The ever-resourceful Kyung Sun has already unearthed information about the drug organization. She's discovered that 2 local drug rings existed previously, but their leaders mysteriously disappeared. She suspects a new organization emerged, absorbing the previous 2. To expose Prosecutor Nam's corruption, Kyung Sun plans to infiltrate the Busan District Prosecutor's office. Hae-il asks her to clear Ja-young's name while she's there. Soon after, Kyung-sun arrives at the prosecutor's office. Her first act is to request the list of wanted individuals. With a few clicks, she cancels Ja-young's arrest warrant. Now a free woman, Ja-young is even more impressed by Hae-il's capabilities and joins his crusade. Kyung-sun meets Hae-il secretly, reporting that Prosecutor Nam is highly cautious and difficult to approach. Hae-il suggests that men like Prosecutor Nam, driven by greed and ambition, also enjoy being flattered. Kyung-sun understands that she'll need to play to the prosecutor's ego, making him complacent and lowering his guard. Despite his ongoing battle with the drug ring, Hae-il doesn't neglect his priestly duties, taking Chae-do from the seminary on another volunteer outing. This time, he sees the elderly woman he'd helped before being taken away in a van by factory personnel, presumably for work. Hae-il is unaware that this food factory is actually a drug manufacturing facility run by the cartel, exploiting the elderly from the nursing home as cheap labor. The kingpin warns the elderly workers not to reveal anything about the factory's operations. The next evening, Hae-il visits the elderly woman again. He sees the factory van dropping her off, the driver treating her roughly. Hae-il, enraged, punches the driver, but the woman intervenes. Back at her apartment, Hae-il cooks for her and asks where she works. The woman, afraid to tell the truth, lies, saying she makes twisted breadsticks. Hae-il, sensing her hesitation, becomes suspicious. That night, he tells Chae-do that something isn't right about the factory. The hot-headed young Chae-do suggests they rough up the factory workers. Hae-il counsels patience, advising him to save his anger for later, when it will be most effective. The next day, following Hae-il's instructions, Chae-do poses as a food delivery driver to surveil the factory while the van picks up the elderly woman. He observes tight security at the gate, manned by intimidating, burly guards, not at all what one would expect at a food processing plant. He reports his findings to Hae-il, further solidifying the priest's suspicions. Hae-il cautions Chae-do to be more careful in his future investigations. While Chae-do investigates, Hae-il and Detective Gu bring Ja-young to the church to meet the nun and Father Han. At that moment, the drug kingpin arrives. Hae-il immediately senses an aura of evil around him. Inside the church, the elderly priest conducts mass. The kingpin, while feigning piety, secretly sneers, showing no reverence. Hae-il notices him handing the priest a hefty donation of 2 billion won. Hae-il follows him out, attempting to return the exorbitant sum, but the kingpin refuses, claiming the church needs financial resources to fight Satan. Before leaving, he asks Hae-il if donating a large sum of money guarantees him a place in heaven. Hae-il replies that money alone won't get him into heaven, but it can certainly pave his way to hell. After Mass, Hae-il sets the next phase of his plan in motion. Though Fire-il is dead, only Hae-il and his allies know this. The drug organization is still in the dark. Hae-il plans to exploit this, having Mr. Go impersonate Fire-il. They'll spread a rumor that Ja-young is a corrupt cop looking to extort money from the drug ring in exchange for Fire-il's release. They send a message to the drug organization, demanding a 10 billion won ransom. If they don't pay, they'll hand Fire-il over to the National Intelligence Service. The organization quickly agrees to a meeting. Hae-il and his team prepare meticulously. To maintain the illusion, they stuff Mr. Go's clothes with padding to mimic fire. On the night of the meeting, they tie up and gag the disguised Mr. Go, who's wearing a mask, and position him nearby. Mr. Go plays his part, mimicking Fire-il's distinctive voice. The kingpin's men demand to see the priest. Ja-young and Detective Gu step forward, putting on a show. Ja-young in particular steals the scene with her Harley Quinn-inspired costume from Batman. The thugs demand the hostage first, then the money. Seeing they've taken the bait, Ja-young rips off Mr. Go's mask, revealing the deception and announcing Fire-il's demise. However, the thugs are prepared, producing Fire-il's mother, threatening to harm her unless Ja-young and her companions follow them. It turns out the kingpin had contacted a hacker who traced the photo of Fire-il that Hae-il's group had sent, realizing it was taken days earlier. The kingpin suspected a trap. Just as the thugs think they have the upper hand, Hae-il, disguised as the Joker, appears atop a carousel. Undeterred, the thugs threaten to kill Fire-il's mother. Suddenly, Fire-il's mother stirs, weakly getting out of her wheelchair. Hae-il, anticipating the kingpin's move, had already arranged for Che-du to take the real Fire Eel's mother from the hospital to safety. The woman in the wheelchair was a decoy. The thugs immediately call for reinforcements lying in wait. Unafraid, Hae-il and Jia Young charge, swiftly incapacitating dozens of thugs. At that moment, the anti-narcotics unit Hae-il had called earlier arrives, arresting the remaining criminals. To everyone's surprise, the kingpin sends men to ram the police cars, igniting a chaotic brawl and allowing his men to escape. By the time Hae-il and the others arrive, more than half the police officers are seriously injured. Hae-il pursues one of the kingpin's men, engaging in a fierce fight, unaware that the kingpin is observing from a distance, learning his identity. As the kingpin sends more thugs, the tireless Hae-il urges them to bring it on. A massive brawl erupts between Hae-il and the drug gang's enforcers. The fight is intense, but the police arrive in time to provide backup, forcing the thugs to retreat. That evening, to avoid the enemy's watchful eyes, Hae-il and Kyung-sun exchange information, while playfully taking cute sticker photos. Hae-il reveals that the thugs they fought weren't ordinary gangsters, but highly trained assassins from Southeast Asia, suggesting the drug organization might also originate from that region. He instructs Kyung-sun to continue cozying up to Prosecutor Nam, building a close relationship to extract information. To facilitate her mission, Hae-il provides her with a luxury car. The kingpin, having witnessed the night's battle, realizes Hae-il's no ordinary priest. However, he's not yet ready to eliminate him. He sees a worthy opponent as a rare source of amusement. To uncover the drug organization's identity, Hae-il scours the internet. He remembers one of the assassins having a lizard tattoo on his arm. However, his online search yields no useful information. Growing impatient, he contacts two other allies, the chubby convenience store clerk and Song Sak, the Thai delivery driver. Both friends complain about being forgotten by Hae-il, vowing never to answer his calls again. Yet the moment his call comes through, they eagerly answer on speakerphone. Hae-il summons them to Busan immediately. Without hesitation, they hop on their electric scooters and speed off. Meanwhile, Detective Gu and Jia Young attempt to identify the assassins from the previous night, using facial recognition software, but without success. To occupy their time, Hae-il and his companions decide to find some trouble, specifically, targeting the corrupt police officers colluding with the drug ring. After formulating a plan, they stake out a construction site where the officers are meeting with local smugglers. True to his belief in swift justice, Hae-il makes a grand entrance, confronting the criminals. However, his dramatic entrance is slightly undermined when he tumbles down a dune. One of the officers curses and approaches him. Hae-il swiftly delivers a kick and a slap, instructing the thugs to apply anesthetic ointment from a nearby container, warning them of the painful beating they'll receive otherwise. The thugs comply, smearing ointment on their faces before charging at Hae-il. The priest, however, displays impressive martial arts skills, using pressure point techniques to immobilize them. The police officers, realizing they're facing the legendary priest, attempt to flee. But as they open their car doors, they're met by Jia Young and Detective Gu, armed with stun batons, who quickly subdue them. The next morning, the crates the smugglers were attempting to move are displayed at a public location, alongside the corrupt officers, bound and gagged in mats. A crowd gathers, cheering and taking photos. At that moment, Mr. Go calls with the news. The facial recognition software has yielded a result. One of the assassins is known as Dried Anchovy. Mr. Go has a nagging feeling that he's seen him somewhere before. That day, back at his restaurant, Mr. Go is contemplating Dried Anchovy, when a sudden bout of flatulence unlocks a buried memory. He immediately contacts Hae-il. It turns out Dried Anchovy had attended the same cooking class as him. That evening, Hae-il, Detective Gu, and Jia Young stake out the cooking class. Mr. Go texts them, informing them that Dried Anchovy attends every evening, because he has a crush on the instructor. Soon enough, Dried Anchovy arrives with a gift and a bouquet of roses, clearly intending to confess his feelings. The trio starts a betting pool. Hae-il bets on a simple rejection, Detective Gu on having the gifts thrown back at him, and Jia Young predicts a slap in the face. They settle in outside the classroom, munching on popcorn and waiting for the show. Jia Young, proving that women understand women best, wins the bet. Dried Anchovy not only receives a brutal rejection, but also has his gifts hurled back at him, followed by a resounding slap. Humiliated, he wipes away his tears and answers a call from the kingpin. Inside his car, Dried Anchovy sobs uncontrollably as Hae-il and the others follow. They track him to a warehouse where other gang members are moving packages. Inside, the thugs are cheerfully packaging drugs, disguised as dried fish. Hae-il arrives, announcing his intention to deliver a grand opening gift they won't forget. Meanwhile, the cartel continues to exploit the elderly at their drug manufacturing facility. The elderly woman believes they're making candy and cookies. The drug dealers even give her a pill at the end of her shift, claiming it's for the flu. She takes it and that night experiences vivid, drug-induced nightmares. Chae-do, visiting the woman, finds her coughing severely and notices a chemical smell on her clothes. He suspects something is amiss with the factory. Chae-do reports his concerns to Hae-il, who instructs him to take the woman to the hospital and then investigate the cookie factory. Chae-do follows his instructions, but is surprised to find the woman looking unusually cheerful and refreshed the next morning. He then goes to the Food Administration, reporting his suspicions, but the officials seem indifferent. Frustrated, Chae-do decides to infiltrate the factory himself. He's quickly discovered by the thugs and thrown out. That evening, the elderly woman collapses while working, seemingly lifeless. To cover up their crime, the thugs carry her back to her apartment, placing her in bed to make it appear as if she died in her sleep. Meanwhile, Kyung-sun, to gain Prosecutor Nam's trust, asks him to assign her some minor drug cases. She quickly extracts confessions from the suspects, impressing Prosecutor Nam. He tells a colleague that the new prosecutor has a crazy vibe. That evening, Prosecutor Nam meets with the Kingpin. Chief Prosecutor Park has been investigating Prosecutor Nam for corruption. To outmaneuver his rival, Prosecutor Nam needs the Kingpin's help. During their meeting, the Kingpin remarks that it's a shame only two men are enjoying the delicious meal. Prosecutor Nam, sensing an opportunity, calls Kyung-sun to join them. He's increasingly pleased with her competence and flattery. As Kyung-sun arrives at the restaurant, the Kingpin excuses himself to take a call in the restroom. Prosecutor Nam tells Kyung-sun he wants to introduce her to a successful young entrepreneur. Kyung-sun realizes that Prosecutor Nam is finally about to reveal his benefactor. Prosecutor Nam then hints to Kyung-sun that he needs someone to take the fall for bribery charges, offering her a bright future in exchange. Since he seems to trust her, Kyung-sun readily agrees, inwardly lamenting her slightly greasy hair and wishing she'd washed it before going out. Just then, the Kingpin returns from the restroom. Kyung-sun turns, flipping her hair. In that instant, the Kingpin's heart skips a beat. He sees her as a vision of beauty, walking through a field of flowers, straight into his heart. At the table, the Kingpin nervously introduces himself. Kyung-sun immediately notices his intense gaze. She's completely unaware that this charming man is her greatest enemy. Infatuated, the Kingpin asks if she's married. Learning she's single, he blushes. Before leaving, he asks for her business card. Kyung-sun, quick on her feet, claims she hasn't had them printed yet. He watches her leave, smitten. The next day, the Kingpin sees a billboard advertising a meteor shower and immediately calls Kyung-sun, inviting her to watch the once-in 60-year celestial event. Kyung-sun, however, fabricates a fear of objects falling from the sky, politely declining. The Kingpin is deeply disappointed. Meanwhile, Hae-il and his team follow the drug dealers to a warehouse, discovering they're packaging drugs. Without hesitation, Hae-il charges in, swiftly incapacitating the thugs and forcing them to load the crates of drugs onto a truck. He also instructs Detective Gu to place specialized headgear on the thugs. The moment the headgear is on, the thugs collapse unconscious. Hae-il and his team confiscated the entire shipment. Jia Yong estimates this quantity could have addicted at least 1 million people. The Kingpin, unfazed by the loss, orders his men to immediately package and distribute their remaining supply. Chae-do, meanwhile, attempts another infiltration of the cookie factory, but is caught and thrown out again. He reports his suspicions to the police, but they refuse to believe him. The seminary president, learning of Chae-do's latest escapade, bails him out and confines him to the seminary, pending a disciplinary hearing. Chae-do calls Hae-il, confessing his troubles and asking him to check on the elderly woman, as she's not answering her phone. Hae-il arrives at the woman's apartment to find her dead. Devastated, Chae-do sneaks out of the seminary to mourn at her side. Hae-il wants an autopsy performed, but the police, having received instructions from Prosecutor Nam, claim she died of natural causes. That evening, as Hae-il and Chae-do pray for the woman, the police inform them that her body will be cremated soon. Hae-il expresses his suspicions, noting the smell of gasoline on her body and a gray substance under her fingernails, but the police remain dismissive. Furious, Hae-il confronts them, vowing to investigate if they won't. Chae-do is convinced her death is connected to the cookie factory. Hae-il shares his suspicions, determined to get to the bottom of it. That night, as the Kingpin supervises the packaging of drugs at the factory, alarms blare. The Seoul Narcotics Unit raids the facility with guns and drug-sniffing dogs, conducting a thorough search. However, they don't find drugs, but ingredients for burn ointment. Even highly trained drug dogs detect nothing unusual. After contacting their superiors, the narcotics unit withdraws. Prosecutor Nam later asks the Kingpin how he managed to evade the search. The Kingpin reveals that his organization has developed a substance that neutralizes a dog's sense of smell. Hae-il, observing from a distance, witnesses the Kingpin's deception firsthand. He and his team check the drugs they'd confiscated earlier, finding them replaced with burn ointment. The Kingpin had anticipated Hae-il's move and switched the cargo. Frustrated, Hae-il rubs his reddening eyes, a deep frown etched on his face. He and his team gather at the docks near the factory, where the elderly woman and others work. Knowing that official channels have failed, Hae-il decides on a risky plan. Detective Gu will go undercover, infiltrating the drug organization. Before they can finalize the plan, Hae-il receives news that the elderly woman's body is about to be cremated. He rushes to the crematorium. Hae and Chae-do desperately try to stop the cremation, but the police threaten them with tasers. Chae-do shields Hae-il, but while he remains unaffected, Hae-il, grabbing Chae-do's shoulder, is shocked and collapses. When he wakes up, he and Chae-do are in a holding cell. Hae-il is baffled by Chae-do's immunity to the taser. Chae-do speculates that he might be a superconductor. The seminary president arrives, bailing them out and ordering them back to the seminary for their disciplinary hearing. Hae-il and Chae-do seize an opportunity and slip away. They arrive at the crematorium too late. The woman's body is already being cremated. Both are heartbroken. A poor woman dies, and the authorities treat her worse than a stray dog. The injustice reinforces Hae-il's resolve to fight evil. Chae-do declares his intention to join Hae-il's righteous army. After holding a small memorial service for the woman, Hae-il and Chae-do return to the seminary for their disciplinary hearing. Worried about Chae-do's future, Hae-il tells the president he'll accept the punishment in Chae-do's place. The president, however, insists on suspending Chae-do for a semester. Hae-il pleads with him to reconsider, offering to refrain from losing his temper for a month. For the hot-tempered Hae-il, this is a significant sacrifice. With Chae-do's situation resolved, Hae-il meets Kyung-sun at a quirky secret art museum. Kyung-sun informs him that Prosecutor Nam holds compromising information on several high-ranking officials. Hae-il instructs her to uncover these weaknesses and exploit them. They then play a 3D writing game, during which Kyung-sun reveals she has completely captivated Prosecutor Nam's benefactor. From her description, Hae-il recognizes him as a wealthy church donor. To extract information, Hae-il encourages Kyung-sun to treat the benefactor like a romantic interest. Kyung-sun jokes that she doesn't like tall guys, except for Hae-il, of course. After playing a Dragon Slayer game, Hae-il shares his infiltration plan with Kyung-sun, showing her a list of wanted criminals. Kyung-sun notices a fugitive named Han Mo, who looks exactly like Detective Gu. This is Hae-il's plan. Detective Gu will impersonate Han Mo and infiltrate the organization. Detective Gu is reluctant, pointing out that Han Mo has a distinctive birthmark that would be difficult to replicate. The others suggest makeup, but Detective Gu sweats easily. They exchange knowing glances, a mischievous plan forming. Two of the allies who arrived in Busan the previous day, including the chubby convenience store clerk, hold Detective Gu down while Song-sak delivers a perfectly executed Muay Thai kick to his face. A birthmark, identical to Han Mo's, instantly appears, so convincing that even his own mother wouldn't recognize him. The wanted poster also mentions Han Mo has 2 accomplices and a girlfriend. The Thai delivery driver and the chubby clerk fit the descriptions of the accomplices, leaving Ja Young to play the girlfriend. That night, the 4, fully disguised, prepare to infiltrate the drug gang's hideout. Meanwhile, at the church, Hae-il prays for guidance in dispelling darkness and bringing forth the light. However, after his prayer, he experiences a sudden headache and collapses. He awakens to find the statue of the Virgin Mary at the seminary engulfed in flames. An uncontrollable rage consumes him. As the statue burns, a drone flies overhead. Hae-il realizes it's arson and that someone is brazenly observing the scene. He chases the drone, but the operator nearby panics and flees. Hae-il tells the seminary president about his suspicions, believing the local drug gang is responsible. The president questions why a priest is investigating criminal organizations, especially accompanied by the troublesome Che-do. Hae-il retorts that he has to intervene because the police are incompetent. Realizing Hae-il isn't at the seminary for legitimate priestly duties, the president orders him to leave. Hae-il, unfazed, reminds the president of their agreement. To save Che-do from expulsion, Hae-il had made a deal. The president would rescind Che-do's punishment and allow Hae-il free reign at the seminary. In return, Hae-il promised to fill the church for every mass and triple the seminary's enrollment applications the following year. He insists the president honor their deal. However, Hae-il's activities attract the attention of Prosecutor Nam, who investigates his background, discovering he's no ordinary priest. Hae-il was once a top agent in the National Intelligence Service's Counterterrorism Unit. Armed with this knowledge, Prosecutor Nam confronts Hae-il at the beach, threatening to harm innocent people around him if he interferes further. Hae-il, fearless, warns Prosecutor Nam to worry about himself. The ruthless Prosecutor Nam recently orchestrated the downfall of a rival prosecutor, using his connection to the drug kingpin. He visits a secret location late at night, believing his actions are undetected. However, Kyung-sun is following him. Hae-il had given her a special piece of paper, with a tracking chip embedded in it. Kyung-sun deliberately used this paper to print work documents for Prosecutor Nam, and it's now in his bag. Wearing a bank robber-style hood, she shadows him to the secret location. Prosecutor Nam, a meticulous record keeper, documents his rival's illegal activities on video, using this as leverage for his career advancement. Meanwhile, Hae-il struggles to find any leads on the drug gang. Frustrated, he reaches out to an acquaintance familiar with Southeast Asia. The acquaintance tells Hae-il about a notorious drug cartel in Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle, called Saban, led by a ruthless figure named Baklak. However, Baklak and his army recently vanished mysteriously. Hae-il suspects he may have relocated to Korea, aiming to build a drug empire. The problem is that neither of them knows Baklak's true identity. While Hae-il investigates Baklak, the drug kingpin is preoccupied with matters of the heart. News of the meteor shower dominates the radio. He calculates that if he misses this one, he'll have to live to be 100 to see the next one. He calls Kyung-sun, inviting her to watch it with him. Kyung-sun invents another excuse, claiming there's a superstition that watching meteor showers brings bad luck, citing the example of Chow Yun-fat's character in A Better Tomorrow being shot immediately after watching one. While the kingpin suffers romantic setbacks, Hae-il's team prepares to infiltrate the drug gang, aiming to uncover the kingpin's identity. Detective Gu, disguised as the wanted criminal, will be accompanied by Ja Young, playing his shaman girlfriend. Mr. Go has discovered that the real girlfriend is indeed a shaman. Ja Young dons a shaman outfit for the role. Detective Gu and the others meet some low-level thugs at a bar. The thugs, dismissive and arrogant, are quickly put in their place by Song-sak, who claims they want to kill Priest Hae-il. After this introduction, Detective Gu and his team enjoy a hearty meal. They receive intel that the thugs have revealed a meeting location with their superiors. They rush to the location, where they encounter higher-ranking thugs, who immediately recognize Detective Gu and Ja Young's resemblance to the police officers they've encountered before. Fortunately, another thug arrives, mistaking Detective Gu for an old acquaintance. This allays some suspicion, and they're invited to the office to discuss the details of assassinating the priest. However, they're required to surrender their belongings, including their phones. The thugs find 2 packs of toothpicks on Detective Gu, mistaking them for some new assassin's weapon. Inside the office, they meet the thugs' leader. They put on a tough act, declaring their intention to kill the priest for interfering with their multi-million-dollar operation. The leader, however, tells them they can't kill the priest yet because their chairman has forbidden it. He offers them food and lodging while they wait. Just when their infiltration seems successful, a thug voices his suspicion about Detective Gu, worried he might be the cop. The leader discreetly confirms his suspicions, revealing he's already investigating. He'd sent men to tail Hae-il and Detective Gu. The men send surveillance photos. Detective Gu is having dinner with Hae-il, timestamped 20 seconds ago. This seems to clear Detective Gu, but the thug notices that the red birthmark on his face seems to have faded slightly. Thinking fast, Ja Young claims Detective Gu is using skin whitening cream. Finally convinced, the leader and his men fully trust the group. After being escorted to a guest room, Detective Gu retrieves a miniature high-tech phone, hidden in his pants, a gadget provided by Hae-il. Using the toothpicks as makeshift styluses, Detective Gu manages to call his uncle. It turns out his uncle, who bears a striking resemblance to him, was the one having dinner with Hae-il in the surveillance photos. Later, Detective Gu and his team bond with the thugs over dinner and drinks. Once they've gained their trust, Jia Young makes her move. Having researched one of the thugs beforehand, she reveals his past misdeeds, framing them as karmic retribution for his unattractive appearance. The thug, convinced of her supernatural abilities, asks her to read his boss's fortune. He shows them a picture of his boss. To their astonishment, it's the wealthy church donor. That day, the donor is at the church for another fundraising event. Hae-il receives a call from Jia Young and the others, learning the donor's true identity. Enraged, Hae-il confronts him. The kingpin, realizing he's been exposed, attacks Hae-il. A fierce fight ensues, but Hae-il's illness flares up, putting him at a disadvantage. Just as the kingpin is about to deliver a fatal blow, his phone rings. It's Kyung-sun. Father Han had contacted her, revealing the kingpin's true identity. To save Hae-il, Kyung-sun agrees to watch the meteor shower with him. Overjoyed, the kingpin answers the call. As he hangs up, a strange crate rolls towards them. Distracted, the kingpin is about to finish off Hae-il when a heavily armed SWAT team descends upon the scene. A short, stout woman emerges from the crate, ordering everyone except Hae-il arrested. To Hae-il's surprise, she's the police chief. The kingpin is taken into custody. Hae-il meets with the police chief, who's aware of the kingpin's activities. Hae-il hopes she'll dismantle the entire organization, but the chief, cautious and pragmatic, admits she intervened only to save Hae-il. As she predicted, the kingpin, using his wealth and connections, is soon released. Before leaving, he threatens Hae-il, vowing to turn the city into his paradise. To bring down the drug ring once and for all, Hae-il shares crucial information with Kyung-sun. His bookstore friend had sent him intel that morning, revealing a brutal practice of Baklak, the powerful figure behind the Southeast Asian cartel. Whenever his identity is compromised, he detonates a bomb on a ship and escapes, potentially killing hundreds or even thousands. Worse, if cornered by authorities, Baklak uses poison gas to massacre entire villages involved in drug production. If both the bomb and the gas are deployed locally, the death toll could reach 3,000 within minutes. Hae-il believes the drug gang's hideout is a ship docked at the port, likely rigged with explosives. He also suspects a poison gas tower exists somewhere in the city. The priority is to have Detective Gu and the others locate the bomb, while Kyung-sun searches for the gas tower. To accomplish this, Kyung-sun begins to actively court the kingpin, meeting him at the observatory as he'd requested. In front of his crush, the kingpin shyly removes his jacket, revealing a star-patterned t-shirt, a gesture of romance he believes. He'd even brushed up on his astronomy to impress her, gently guiding her arm as he points out constellations. Around Kyung-sun, he abandons his usual ruthlessness. Over dinner, he shares the story behind his name and presents her with a small, seemingly insignificant gift. The next day, Kyung-sun's curiosity gets the better of her. She opens the gift and is stunned to find a massive, dazzling necklace. Suspecting it's a fake, but also doubting a man of the kingpin's stature would give a counterfeit gift, she takes it to a jeweler for appraisal. The jeweler offers her nearly 3 billion won for it, explaining that it's a piece fit for Southeast Asian royalty. Kyung-sun is speechless. Recovering from her shock, she realizes the kingpin, despite his lavish spending, is a romantic novice, easily manipulated. She decides to play hard to get, returning the necklace and claiming she's not the gold digger he takes her for. The kingpin insists he simply thought it suited her. Kyung-sun pretends not to hear his explanation and excuses herself. Her apparent disinterest only deepens his infatuation. He even suggests to Prosecutor Nam that Kyung-sun quit her job, offering to set her up with a luxurious law office. That night, while Prosecutor Nam works late, Kyung-sun attempts to break into his secret location to steal confidential documents. However, as she's picking the lock, she's knocked unconscious from behind. Meanwhile, Hae-il's team remains undercover within the drug organization, waiting for an opportunity. Worried about Hae-il's safety, they're relieved when he sends a message to Detective Gu, arranging a meeting at a restaurant that evening. To get out, they tell the thugs they need to visit their elderly mothers. The thugs, not entirely gullible, question why they all need to go together. Jia Young quickly claims she's meeting her future mother-in-law. The chubby clerk and Song Sak chime in, expressing their own longing for their mothers. Touched by their filial piety, the leader grants them permission. Still suspicious, The fat thug makes a bet with the leader, sending his men to tail Detective Goo's group. If he's wrong, he'll accept 2 slaps in the face. At 7 p.m., Detective Goo and the others arrive at the restaurant. Anticipating surveillance, they've arranged for the nun to impersonate Detective Goo's mother. They stage a tearful reunion, moving the watching thugs to tears. Hearing his men's report, the leader delivers 2 slaps to the fat thug's face. After the thugs leave, Detective Goo and the others receive the information Hail had sent with the nun. He instructs them to locate the explosives on the ship. They'll need specialized equipment, which the chubby clerk can provide. It turns out he has a supernatural ability to detect high-frequency sounds emitted by explosives. Returning to the drug gang's hideout, they find the thugs rarely leave, making it difficult to search for the bomb. Just then, the Kingpin returns, ordering them to escort a shipment bound for Thailand. Their opportunity has arrived. They eagerly prepare for the mission. While the thugs are busy with the shipment, the chubby clerk removes a battery from a stuffed animal and uses it to create an electrical contact with his palm, amplifying the high-frequency sounds emitted by the explosives. Just as he thinks he's close, the leader calls out Detective Goo's real name. Their cover is blown. Meanwhile, the Kingpin, learning his identity has been exposed in Southeast Asia, goes to the bookstore and knocks out Hail's friend, the owner. At the seminary, to support Hail, Che-do recruits fellow seminarians for an anti-drug campaign, planning to educate the elderly at the nursing home. Some seminarians are hesitant, fearing the drug cartel. Che-do rallies them, reminding them of Hail's teachings and urging them to be brave. Following their plan, Che-do and the seminarians march through the neighborhood, holding signs that read "No buying drugs," "No selling drugs," chanting righteous slogans. Prosecutor Nam, worried about the negative publicity, suggests to the Kingpin that they teach the seminarians a lesson. They agree, and the Kingpin sends thugs to the seminary to attack the students. As the students are being brutally beaten, Hail arrives dramatically on his motorcycle, swiftly taking down the thugs. However, during the fight, he's attacked from behind, bleeding profusely and collapsing unconscious. After being rushed to the ER, Hail's 2 companions, Father Han and the young nun, learn the shocking news. Hail suffers from multiple sclerosis and has been undergoing treatment. While in a coma, Hail experienced a vivid dream. He saw the deceased former priest of their church. The old priest imparted wisdom to Hail, urging him to share his burdens and trust his comrades. Inspired by the old priest's words, Hail regained his faith and finally woke up. That evening, the police chief visited Hail in his hospital room, hoping to confess. Upon first taking office, the chief had been determined to dismantle the local drug trafficking ring. However, she quickly discovered that her detectives in the Major Crimes Unit were colluding with the criminals, refusing to follow her orders. To make matters worse, the drug cartel then kidnapped her mother. With her mother's life hanging in the balance, the chief was forced to turn a blind eye to their illicit activities. Now, finally seeing a glimmer of hope, she confessed everything to Hail and proposed they work together to bring the drug traffickers to justice. Hail, ever the optimist, confidently thumped his chest and assured her it wouldn't be a problem, declaring himself an expert at turning the tables. Following the chief's visit, Hail, despite his illness, abruptly discharged himself from the hospital. Father Han and the nun tried desperately to dissuade him, but the quick-witted Hail found an excuse and slipped away. Once out of the hospital, Hail met with a student named Che-do. The previous day, Che-do and the school principal had learned from Father Han and the nun about Hail's mission as a Barator, understanding that his purpose was to fulfill a divine mission, helping and protecting the vulnerable. Inspired by Hail's dedication, Che-do eagerly expressed his desire to become his partner, to join him in fighting against evil. Hail explained to Che-do that, from that day forward, they would both be members of a citizen patrol unit under the direct command of the police chief, tasked with assisting in the drug trafficking investigation. Since her confession and newfound resolve, the police chief had been working tirelessly. She announced the formation of a brand new anti-narcotics task force, effectively stripping the corrupt Major Crimes Unit of its authority over drug-related cases. What surprised the Major Crimes Unit even more was the revelation that the captain of this newly formed task force was essentially a puppet, completely under the chief's control. She had played her cards close to her chest and was now ready to make her move. The Major Crimes Unit scoffed, thinking the police chief was bluffing. They were stunned when Hail strolled in, feigning familiarity, shaking hands, and exchanging pleasantries with the chief's puppet captain. Furious and desperate, the Major Crimes Unit contacted their corrupt ally, Prosecutor Nam. Hoping he could intervene, Prosecutor Nam cursed the chief's audacity, calling her insane, but admitted he was powerless. The prosecutor's office couldn't interfere with internal police personnel decisions. Meanwhile, after enlisting Hae-il and Chae-do, the chief headed to a local gym. This seemingly innocuous fitness center was actually a front, used by a corrupt officer in league with the drug cartel as a packaging and distribution hub. The trio wasted no words, bursting into the gym. Working seamlessly together, they quickly overpowered the thugs inside. News of the raid reached the drug lord. His henchmen urged him to flee immediately, emphasizing the escalating danger, now that the police chief was personally involved. Just then, the drug lord received a call from Prosecutor Kyung-sun, whom he secretly admired. The previous night, Kyung-sun had attempted to investigate Prosecutor Nam's secret base, but was attacked with a taser and rendered unconscious. Fortunately, her assailant didn't harm her further. Now, Kyung-sun played it cool, casually mentioning she was just driving by, and happened to think of him. The drug lord, instantly elated, rushed to meet her, even stopping to buy her 2 heart-shaped popcorn balls. Kyung-sun, a master of charm, skillfully flattered the drug lord, making him blush. When a piece of popcorn stuck to the corner of her mouth, he gently removed it, and, to her surprise and perhaps slight disgust, popped it into his mouth. Kyung-sun, maintaining her charade, expressed her hope of establishing a scholarship fund for underprivileged children. The smitten drug lord readily agreed. Subtly, he probed her about her plans, asking if she intended to stay in the area. Kyung-sun answered with a resounding yes, adding that she hoped he would stay too. This was precisely Kyung-sun's objective. She was playing for time, using her feminine wiles to keep the drug lord occupied and prevent his escape. Her colleagues, Jia Yong, Inspector Gu, and the others, were still hidden inside the drug cartel's shipping container. They had located the explosives believed to be stashed by the drug lord. Just as they were about to pry open the container door, they were unexpectedly confronted by the corrupt police captain and his hulking accomplice, Fatty. Fatty, still suspicious of Jia Yong and Inspector Gu's identities, eyed them warily. The situation inside the container was about to explode, both literally and figuratively. The captain, also caught in the crossfire, locked Jia Yong and the others inside the container. His orders were clear: no one was to leave until the drug lord returned to personally confirm their identities. The drug lord arrived, radiating menace. In front of Inspector Gu and the others, he abruptly pulled a knife and stabbed one of his own men, a curly-haired underling, in a shocking display of brutality. The drug lord explained his actions with chilling indifference, stating the man was eliminated for his incompetence. He then ordered Fatty to kill Inspector Gu and his team, regardless of who they were, claiming he hated ambiguity. As Fatty and the others moved in, Inspector Gu and his team sprang to their feet, preparing to defend themselves. Suddenly and unexpectedly, another of the drug lord's henchmen spoke up, vouching for them. This henchman recalled an incident from years ago, when Inspector Gu had fought a Japanese gangster in Osaka, sustaining 2 skewer wounds to his back during the altercation. He reasoned that if this Inspector Gu were an imposter, he wouldn't have these scars. Intrigued, the drug lord demanded Inspector Gu remove his shirt. To everyone's astonishment, including Inspector Gu's, 2 distinct scars were visible on his back. The drug lord, now convinced of their legitimacy, called off the attack. Fatty, the troublemaker, received a well-deserved beating from the TIE fighter. Later, back in their holding room, the group puzzled over how the henchmen knew about Inspector Gu's scars. In reality, the skewer wounds were the result of a barbecue mishap a few days prior when Hae-il had accidentally stabbed Inspector Gu with a fork. After careful recollection, they deduced that the henchman must have glimpsed the marks when Inspector Gu had changed his shirt in the room a few days earlier. Though still unsure why the henchman had helped them, their immediate priority was figuring out how to disarm the bomb inside the shipping container. Just then, they received a message via a miniature phone from Kyung-sun about Hae-il's condition. Worried, they decided to go check on him. They concocted a story for the captain, claiming they needed to visit their sick mother. The captain, still grieving the loss of his friend, the curly-haired henchman killed by the drug lord, tearfully agreed. He asked them to offer prayers for his fallen comrade upon their return. However, just as they were about to leave, Fatty heard screams coming from another room. The drug lord was interrogating Hae-il's friend, a former National Intelligence Service agent who had helped Hae-il obtain classified information about him. The drug lord, having learned of her betrayal, had captured her and was now torturing her to reveal who else she had shared his information with. When the woman refused to answer, he ordered his men to begin a special form of torture. After observing the situation and discussing their options, Inspector Gu and the team decided to stay and rescue the woman, while also taking the opportunity to investigate the mysterious henchman who had helped them. To carry out their plan, they lied to the captain, telling him that instead of visiting their mother, they felt compelled to do a good deed first and hold a memorial service for the curly-haired henchman. The captain was instantly moved to tears, exclaiming that he had met living bodhisattvas. Inspector Gu discreetly sought out the helpful henchman, questioning him about his motives and the identity of the woman being tortured. The henchman remained tight-lipped, so the team surrounded him, applying pressure. With no other choice, he finally confessed. It turned out he was an undercover narcotics officer named Sang Woo, a junior colleague of both Inspector Gu and Jia Yong. Sang Woo recounted his story with a melancholic tone, likening his situation to Yoon Jae's character in the movie New World, an undercover cop abandoned after years of service, his true identity and police affiliation unknown to anyone. Song Saek, the TIE fighter, expressed surprise, noting that undercover cops were usually portrayed as handsome and cool, unlike Sang Woo. Regardless, Sang Woo was clearly tired of his undercover life. Inspector Gu and the others promised to help him restore his official police status. They also learned from Sang Woo about the captive woman's background as a former National Intelligence Service agent. Meanwhile, having received a message from Inspector Gu, Hale rushed to his friend's bookstore, confirming her abduction by the drug lord. To rescue her, Inspector Gu devised a plan to raid the drug cartel's headquarters with Jia Yong. To facilitate their infiltration, Hale and Kyung Sun agreed to some unconventional disguises. Hale, dressed in drag, complete with high heels, a short skirt, and a long wig, looked surprisingly convincing, almost unbelievably beautiful. Hale and Kyung Sun, in their disguises, arrived at the drug lord's headquarters. Posing as shamans, they pretended to perform a ritual at the request of Jia Yong and the team, claiming it was necessary for their supposed investigation. In front of the drug lord's henchmen, they put on a show of superstitious mumbo-jumbo, ultimately declaring that the deceased henchman's restless spirit was trapped somewhere on the boat, and a thorough search was required. Seizing this opportunity, and guided by the undercover officer Sang Woo, Hale slipped away and successfully freed his friend from her confinement. He entrusted her to Sang Woo, instructing him to bring the innocent elderly workers from the drug lab to the police station. With Hale's part of the mission accomplished, Kyung Sun and the others dropped their charade and attacked the henchmen, creating a diversion to cover their escape. Amidst the chaos, Hale confronted the drug lord in his office. A fierce fight erupted between them. During the struggle, the drug lord grabbed a gun and aimed it at Hale, demanding his surrender. Quick thinking, Hale deflected the gun and leaped down into the drug lab, escaping with his comrades. The enraged drug lord ordered his men to pursue them. Another intense confrontation ensued. Just as things were looking dire, Father Han and the nun arrived in their car, providing a much-needed escape route. Meanwhile, Sang Woo successfully completed his task, bringing the elderly workers to safety at the police station. The captain assured them they would be treated leniently. With the mission accomplished, Hale and the others took a moment to rest and recover. Everyone expressed concern for Father Han's health. In a heartfelt moment, Hale admitted that he had been so focused on his mission that he'd neglected to share his burdens and personal struggles with his friends. He vowed to be more open and honest with them from now on. At the same time, the police chief held a press conference, declaring an all-out war against the local drug cartel. Hale returned to the seminary to meet with the principal. He had learned that the principal had met with the archbishop to discuss his recent activities. The archbishop had reprimanded the principal for his lack of oversight and cautioned against directly confronting such dangerous forces. However, the principal remained unapologetic. Witnessing Hale's unwavering commitment to justice had completely changed his perspective. He now recognized that a priest like Hale, willing to stand up against injustice, was a rare and valuable asset. In truth, Hale realized that the principal had been a champion of justice long before he was. Che-Du had unearthed old newspaper articles from years ago, revealing the principal's activism in his younger days, fighting to help impoverished residents facing forced displacement. Remembering those past struggles, the principal lamented the death of his friend and comrade from that time. Seeing Hale fall, bloodied, during the raid had brought back painful memories of his best friend's sacrifice. Hale reassured him that death wasn't something to fear, emphasizing the importance of passing the torch of justice to the next generation. Inspired by Hale's words, the principal completely revamped the seminary's curriculum. He enlisted Che-Du to lead the other students in Taekwondo training, fostering both physical and mental discipline. Meanwhile, The final showdown between Haeil's Righteous Alliance and the drug cartel loomed. Based on Sang Woo's long-term observations, Inspector Gu and Jia Yang targeted a maritime shipping warehouse, believed to be the drug lord's secret base for importing and exporting narcotics. Capturing this location would effectively cripple his entire operation. The following day, Inspector Gu and the team, fully prepared, raided the warehouse, swiftly neutralizing the guards inside. They then persuaded the warehouse manager to cooperate and testify against the drug lord at the police station. Simultaneously, Sang Woo confronted a customs official, bribed by the drug lord. Jia Yang apprehended the corrupt official on the spot, further disrupting the drug lord's network. Elsewhere, Prosecutor Nam received a call from a police officer. Following Haeil's hospitalization, the police had placed Kyung Sun under surveillance and discovered her visit to him. Seeing the surveillance footage of Kyung Sun at the hospital, Prosecutor Nam realized she was working with Haeil and that he had been deceived. He initially considered informing the drug lord about Kyung Sun's true allegiance, but ultimately decided against it. In Kyung Sun's presence, he feigned ignorance, maintaining a friendly and concerned facade. Unaware that her cover was blown, Kyung Sun went to Prosecutor Nam's secret base that night to retrieve incriminating evidence. As she approached the entrance, two men in black, wielding knives, confronted her. Suddenly, both assailants were incapacitated by electric shocks, and Kyung Sun was rescued. Her savior was a female colleague from the prosecutor's office. The colleague revealed the truth. She was part of an internal investigations team from the Busan District Prosecutor's office, tasked by the chief prosecutor with gathering evidence against Prosecutor Nam, operating on the principle of, it takes one to know one. She had long suspected Kyung Sun's true identity. It was she who had tased Kyung Sun during her previous attempt to infiltrate the base. She explained that she had done so to protect Kyung Sun. The female colleague explained that Prosecutor Nam habitually monitored the security cameras inside his base from his phone. Had Kyung Sun broken in, she would have been immediately recorded. Tonight, however, the colleague had secretly accessed Prosecutor Nam's computer and seen the footage of Kyung Sun visiting Haeil in the hospital. She realized that Prosecutor Nam now knew Kyung Sun's true motives. With her cover blown, Kyung Sun continued the charade. That night, she sent Prosecutor Nam a picture of herself getting a massage, suggesting he try it too. Prosecutor Nam was bewildered, wondering why his men hadn't eliminated Kyung Sun. Meanwhile, Kyung Sun, continuing her massage at home, cursed Prosecutor Nam under her breath. Just then, the drug lord called, requesting a late-night meeting with Kyung Sun. He informed her that he was leaving town on business the next day and wanted her to come along. Kyung Sun realized he was planning to escape and immediately refused. Significantly, the drug lord seemed unaware of her true allegiance, indicating that Prosecutor Nam hadn't betrayed her. Haeil deduced that Prosecutor Nam was trying to distance himself from the drug lord, intentionally withholding information to his detriment. That same night, the drug lord confronted Prosecutor Nam, demanding to know why he hadn't revealed Haeil's past as a National Intelligence Service agent. Prosecutor Nam stammered, but the drug lord saw through his deception, accusing him of wanting them to destroy each other for his benefit. To protect himself, Prosecutor Nam changed tack and finally revealed that Kyung Sun and Haeil were working together. With his plans exposed, the drug lord decided to flee immediately. He ordered his men to load all his cash into containers and prepare for departure. Before leaving, he arranged for Kyung Sun's abduction. He intended to activate pre-planted bombs and poison gas, but was frustrated when the activation program malfunctioned. Enraged, but seeing Kyung Sun tied up in his car, a new sinister plan seemed to form in his mind. Later that day, Haeil tried to contact Kyung Sun, but the drug lord answered. He taunted Haeil, revealing his knowledge of their sabotage of his bombs and poison gas. He declared that Kyung Sun was now his final card. Realizing Kyung Sun was in grave danger, Haeil raced to the church on his motorcycle. He found Kyung Sun bound in the sanctuary, a bomb strapped to her chest, and needles poised at both sides of her neck. The drug lord's voice echoed through the church from Haeil's phone. He explained that the needles were filled with a lethal dose of drugs. Once injected, Kyung Sun would die instantly. If Haeil wanted to save her, he had to use the gun beside him to take his own life. There was only one bullet, one chance. Kyung Sun pleaded with Haeil not to do anything foolish. As Haeil hesitated, the drug lord began a 3-minute countdown. The fate of Kyung Sun, and perhaps Haeil himself, hung precariously in the balance. Without hesitation, Hae II prepared to sacrifice himself. Suddenly, Father Han, in a surprising display of power, let out a lion-like roar, emitting a powerful sonic wave. Capitalizing on the distraction, the nun hurled her rosary beads, shattering the syringes. It turned out Father Han was a hidden talent, possessing unique and specialized training. The danger was effortlessly neutralized. The drug lord, furious at this unexpected turn of events, immediately prepared to flee. The foiled attempt, however, was no accident. It was part of Hale's foresight. The previous night, when the drug lord's men went to check on the bombs and poison gas, they encountered road workers and were instructed to take a detour. These road workers were actually Hale's allies. While the henchmen were diverted, Hale brought a hazmat team to remove the poison gas safely. Following this, 2 more of Hale's teammates, in disguise, infiltrated the drug cartel's base and swiftly deactivated the bombs. With his plans thwarted, the drug lord was on the run, and Hale's alliance had scored a major victory. More good news followed. Dae-young was promoted to lead the new narcotics unit. Sang-woo's personnel file was located, officially reinstating him as a police officer. Furthermore, thanks to the police chief's efforts, the high-ranking officer colluding with Prosecutor Nam was placed under investigation by Internal Affairs. Now, all that remained was apprehending the fugitive drug lord and bringing Prosecutor Nam to justice. Kyung-sun confronted Prosecutor Nam, vowing to expose his collusion with the drug cartel. Unfazed, Prosecutor Nam retorted that she had no concrete evidence, and even if she did, he could easily deny everything. Frustrated by his arrogance, Kyung-sun could only curse him under her breath. Determined to find an opening, Kyung-sun and her colleague snuck into Prosecutor Nam's secret base. Wearing masks, they sprayed the security cameras black and searched for incriminating documents, but found nothing. Fortunately, the colleague noticed a data transfer device. The cunning Prosecutor Nam had stored his data elsewhere. The question was, where? Meanwhile, with the odds stacked against him, Prosecutor Nam planned to cut his losses and save himself by collaborating with the drug cartel's captain. The captain, betraying the drug lord, placed a tracking device on his vehicle and then disclosed his location to Prosecutor Nam. Prosecutor Nam planned to wait until the drug lord crossed the border, then contact Interpol for the arrest. That night, he even reached out to Interpol, requesting that if the drug lord resisted, they should shoot to kill. Meanwhile, Haeil's friend, Mr. Ko, was in contact with the cartel captain. Under Mr. Ko's urging, the captain had double-crossed the drug lord, stealing the money he had set aside for his escape. Discovering the containers meant to be filled with cash were now empty, the drug lord, humiliated and enraged, immediately executed one of his men, according to their code. He then furiously called the captain, who remained unconcerned, taunting the drug lord and claiming he could never be found. Mr. Ko, feigning cooperation with the captain and promising to launder the stolen money, had secretly planted a tracking device inside the cash containers. That night, under the guise of delivering health supplements, Mr. Ko subtly questioned the captain about the drug lord's whereabouts. The unsuspecting captain readily revealed the location, a specific port. Armed with this information, Haeil and his team prepared to move. Dae-young spearheaded the operation. That night, as the captain celebrated with his men, having stashed the stolen money and planning to renege on his deal with Mr. Ko, Dae-young and his team arrived in force, intending to take them down. However, the captain was prepared, summoning a large group of henchmen to confront the police. Despite their best efforts, Dae-young and his team were outnumbered. Just as the captain began to gloat, Chae-do, the seminary student, arrived with reinforcements, a group of his classmates. Anticipating trouble, Haeil had contacted Chae-do earlier. Eager to fight for justice, the enthusiastic Chae-do had rallied his like-minded friends to join the operation. It was a true example of an army of 1,000 days is used in 1 hour. Before the stunned captain, Chae-do and his classmates launched into an energetic taekwondo warm-up. Joining Chae-do in this unlikely posse was the stubborn principal, even more fired up, armed with a Molotov cocktail and urging his students forward. However, a sudden bout of shoulder pain caused him to drop the explosive at his own feet. Chaos erupted as the students, undeterred, charged forward, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the captain's men. Fatty, the hulking henchman, underestimated Chae-do, only to be taken down with a single, powerful punch. The students fought valiantly, overwhelming their opponents. Dae-young and Chae-do emerged victorious, but in the confusion, the captain managed to escape. The captain fled to the secret location where the money was hidden, believing he had the last laugh. However, Mr. Ko, tracking the signal from the device planted in the cash containers, was already there waiting for him. The captain tried to negotiate a split of the stolen money, but Mr. Ko held him fast. Meanwhile, the desperate drug lord arrived at the port, attempting to escape by sea. Just then, Prosecutor Nam appeared with Interpol, ordering the drug lord's arrest, and, once again, urging the officers to shoot him on sight. As the drug lord tried to flee, Hae-il Kyung-soon and Inspector Gu arrived, identifying themselves to Interpol and urging restraint. The officers, however, were insistent on using lethal force. Hae-il and his team frantically argued that if the drug lord died now, Prosecutor Nam would escape accountability. Mid-argument, a strange sound echoed from above as something large fell from the sky in a high-speed arc. Incredibly, it was an airplane cargo door. It crushed 3 of the drug lord's henchmen instantly and injured several Interpol officers. But in the ensuing chaos, the drug lord escaped. That evening, Hae-il and his friends discussed the bizarre incident. Because of the falling cargo door, they'd come up empty-handed. However, they were relieved that Prosecutor Nam's attempt to eliminate the drug lord had failed. Now cornered and increasingly paranoid, fearing both the drug lord's retaliation and exposure of his crimes, Prosecutor Nam contacted high-ranking government officials. He used compromising information he possessed to blackmail them, demanding a transfer to Seoul. Under duress, the officials agreed, and Prosecutor Nam was soon appointed to a powerful position in the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's office. Kyung-sun knew this was a significant promotion, granting him immense influence. That same night, however, Hae-il and his team received good news. Sang-yeon, the young altar boy, finally awoke from his coma. Overjoyed, they took turns speaking to him on the phone. This positive development renewed their determination to fight against the forces of darkness. The bad news wasn't over yet. The fugitive drug lord acquired a gun, looking at a photo on his phone of his mother, who bore a striking resemblance to Kyung-sun. His expression darkened. The following day, Hae-il and his friends gathered at the church to pray, vowing to fight for justice until the very end. That same day, Kyung-sun and Hae-il filed a lawsuit against Prosecutor Nam, detailing all his crimes. They announced to the media that the indictment was just the beginning, promising more dramatic revelations to come. Under pressure, the government established a Truth Investigation Committee and scheduled a hearing, issuing a summons to Prosecutor Nam for the first round of questioning. As the prosecuting attorney, Kyung-sun boldly declared Prosecutor Nam a corrupt official colluding with the drug cartel. She presented a video at the hearing, a recorded conversation between Father Han and the nun. Both testified that Prosecutor Nam had murdered a former prosecutor and disposed of the body, presenting photographic evidence of the corpse. Facing these accusations, the cunning Prosecutor Nam not only denied everything but also fabricated a story, claiming he had infiltrated the drug cartel as part of an undercover investigation, feigning corruption to expose their criminal activities. Kyung-sun countered with her testimony, recounting how Prosecutor Nam had orchestrated her meeting with the drug lord. Hae-il also presented evidence of Prosecutor Nam's threats against him. Unfortunately, the video, audio, and other evidence of Prosecutor Nam's collusion with high-ranking officials remained elusive. Exploiting this gap, Prosecutor Nam portrayed himself as an innocent victim, falsely accused by Hae-il and his associates. He even went so far as to feign tears during the hearing. Hae-il and his 2 companions, enraged by his performance, erupted in angry outbursts and were promptly ejected from the hearing. Also present were the police chief and businessmen linked to the drug trade. As one businessman prepared to testify, he realized his family had been threatened by Prosecutor Nam. To protect them, he was forced to recant, falsely claiming the drug lord was solely responsible, exonerating Prosecutor Nam. Due to these fabricated testimonies, the hearing concluded with Prosecutor Nam cleared of all suspicion. A second hearing was soon scheduled. This time, Prosecutor Nam had secured the support of a high-ranking political official, his co-conspirator. The official testified that Prosecutor Nam was not corrupt, but, on the contrary, a champion in the fight against corruption and drug trafficking. However, what the official and Prosecutor Nam didn't anticipate was Hae-il's secret weapon. After the first hearing, construction workers discovered a data transmission device hidden inside a wall. Coincidentally, this device was linked to a house owned by Prosecutor Nam. During a search of the property, Ja Young located the device's receiver hidden behind a picture frame and retrieved a trove of data. It contained a recorded archive of incriminating conversations with various high-ranking officials, including the one currently testifying, all secretly recorded by Prosecutor Nam. The tables had turned. In the recorded call, Prosecutor Nam was heard saying that the official's son was involved with drugs, but he would help him escape charges. Besides this particular official, the files implicated over 50 other high-ranking officials, in Prosecutor Nam's corruption network. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Prosecutor Nam continued to deny everything. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out in the hearing room. The shooter was the drug lord. He had been monitoring Prosecutor Nam since the first hearing and planned this intrusion with his remaining henchmen. He had kidnapped a congressman and used his car to gain access to the building. Now, gun in hand, he held the entire hearing hostage, aiming directly at the traitorous Prosecutor Nam. However, the gun jammed at a crucial moment. Inspector Gu instantly recognized it as a likely purchase from a notorious arms dealer specializing in counterfeit weapons. Seeing his weapon malfunction, the drug lord pulled a knife. Hale, without hesitation, engaged him in hand-to-hand combat. Fueled by his righteous conviction, he swiftly overpowered the drug lord. With the drug lord captured and Prosecutor Nam exposed, Hai-il and his allies received thunderous applause. Kyung Sun, hailed as a champion of justice, addressed the media. But Prosecutor Nam, still defiant, attempted to bribe the arresting officers. At that moment, a mysterious gust of wind swept through the room, lodging a rosary card in Prosecutor Nam's throat. He choked and sputtered, completely losing his composure, as the officers dragged him away. This divine intervention was actually Father Han, at Hai-il's request, employing his lion's roar technique once again. News of Hai-il and his team's heroic actions spread quickly. Even photos of the principal and Che Du fighting alongside them were leaked to the press. The seminary's newfound fame led to a surge in applications. The principal was overjoyed. Che Du receives a gift from Hai-il, a humorous photo of them together. Hai-il's message to him was clear. Life doesn't stop, and neither does the fight. He urged Che Du to carry the spirit of God and continue serving the vulnerable. Looking at the photo with Hai-il, Che Du's fighting spirit burned brightly. With the dust settled, the cardinal sent his secretary to meet with Hai-il and the others. To commend them for fulfilling their mission of light, the cardinal bestowed upon them gleaming gold crosses as tokens of his appreciation. Hai-il and his friends posed for a celebratory photo, even photoshopping in the absent Mr. Ko. However, there were also career shifts. Kyung Sun resigned from her position as prosecutor, and Inspector Gu was suspended. Both now unemployed, they contemplated their next moves. Hai-il, ever the strategist, suggested Kyung Sun run for the National Assembly. Becoming a force for justice within the government, Kyung Sun embraced the idea and launched a vigorous campaign. Her reputation as a passionate prosecutor quickly garnered support, putting her neck and neck with her opponent. On election night, Kyung Sun and her friends anxiously watched the results on television. Suddenly, a friend accidentally spilled coffee into an electrical outlet, plunging them into darkness. They never saw the final tally. In the days that followed, Hai-il continued his mission of righteousness, carrying his unwavering faith and courage. One night, as a woman was being kidnapped, Hai-il dramatically descended from the sky, landing on the roof of the kidnapper's vehicle. The thugs emerged, menacingly approaching him. Hai-il, eyes blazing with determination, clenched his fists, vowing to bring these villains to justice. And with that cliffhanger, the movie ends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great movies. See you next time.